What's up, Tailgaters? You're in the booth with Tailgate Nate today. Welcome to my channel and welcome. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, the college football playoff is just around the corner, which means finally it is time for me to sit down and preview and predict the college football playoff semifinals. Two unbelievably fascinating games, two very different styles of games. We're going to break them both down in the next two videos. And this one is the 1 versus 4. This is the earlier game out of the two, hence why we're doing it first. It features the champions of the SEC in the Alabama Crimson Tide and the champions of the Big Ten in the Michigan Wolverines. From Pasadena, California, it's the Rose Bowl game. It's the playoff semifinal. It's the college football playoff. A chance to compete for a national championship on the line. And we're going to break down everything involving the Crimson Tide and Wolverines here in just a little bit. But before we do that, you guys know I got to say thank you for all the love and support the channel has seen as of late. Has been crazy to me, and it does mean a lot to me if you would continue to help show your support. Hey, do what you're doing now and watch my videos, subscribe, ring the bell, like, comment, share. Really, anything you do to interact with the channel helps support what I do here on YouTube, and I appreciate everything that you guys are willing and or able to do here. Again, I'm testing out some new equipment, have a new webcam, new lights, new green screen. If anything feels funky or off, anything else that I can do to improve the production value, please let me know in the comment section down below. But with all of that out of the way, guys, it's finally time. It is finally time for us to dive headfirst into previewing the college football playoff. Let's get into it. As you guys know, I like to look at the stats that both these teams have put up so far this season. And let's start with the Alabama Crimson Tide. And arguably, you could say this is the more fascinating team out of the two logos you see on screen here. Why? Well, back in the early season, Alabama lost in week 2 to Texas at home. They barely got by South Florida. Jalen Milroe ended up getting benched. And there were a lot of questions surrounding this Alabama Crimson Tide team. However, they have answered that. They have played really well down the stretch. Jalen Milroe almost brought himself into New York, ended up falling just short there of becoming a Heisman finalist. But more importantly, probably definitely more importantly, led the Crimson Tide to an SEC championship and a berth back in the college football playoff. And this is an offense that, sure, was not super dynamic to start out with, but Jalen Milroe, playing at his best, has really started to boost this offensive unit. He has 2,718 yards, 23 touchdowns to 6 interceptions on the season, and he's got a ton of weapons that he has really started to utilize in the best way possible. We'll start with the wide receivers. He's really started to form chemistry with Jermaine Burton. Now, only 35 catches on the year, but 777 yards. Those of you that aren't too great with math, that's 22.2 yards per catch. 8 touchdowns on the season. Isaiah Bond, of course, had the touchdown in the end zone to win the game against Auburn. Nyblack, Prentice, Dupree, Benson, all of those guys have started to become really big weapons here for the Alabama Crimson Tide. And need I mention the running back room? Jace McClellan and Roydell Williams, even Jalen Milroe himself, as Milroe has 12 rushing touchdowns on the year, have really started to drive this offense forward. It's an offense that is pretty darn good on third down. In fact, they're really good on converting the money downs. They don't turn the football over. They've especially really cleaned up those turnovers as the season has gone along. However, the one thing with this Alabama offense that Jalen Milroe can kind of neutralize and cancel out, but this offensive line is atrocious, and there really is no better way to say it, Bama fans. The offensive line is just not that great in pass protection. In run blocking, boy, they can open up some really nice holes for running backs to slip through. However, in pass pro, you see their 43 sacks on the year. That is just not going to cut it against a Michigan defensive front. We'll talk about why later. Defensively, though, for Bama, this is the defense that also started to get questioned, but it's a defense that is also just really, really good, and it has a ton of weapons here. It's really good on third down. It forces turnovers. It generates a ton of pressure, and that pressure led by a couple of guys. Dallas Turner, Chris Braswell in the linebacking room, 9 sacks for Turner, 8 sacks for Bradwell, and 7 sacks to a member of the defensive line, and Justin Eboigbe. And then they can bring pressure from a ton of other places as well. Got a ton of really talented defensive back, the main guy being Terrion Arnold, and the best lockdown corner in college football in Kool-Aid McKinstry. 11 passes defended, 5 interceptions for Arnold, and for Kool-Aid McKinstry, 7 passes defended for him. Overall, as a defense, you have 12 picks, and this is just a really, really good lockdown secondary. Michigan's going to have a little trouble throwing the ball down the field, especially against these corners and safeties that I think match up really well with Michigan's wide receiver room. However, speaking of Michigan's wide receiver room, I feel like it's one of the more underrated rooms in the country. I think they have a lot of great weapons there, and they are led by a very efficient quarterback in J.J. McCarthy. 2,630 yards, 19 touchdowns to only 4 picks on 74% completion percentage. This is one of, if not the most efficient passing offenses in the nation. I believe they're like third or fourth in total passing efficiency offensively, and it's not just J.J. McCarthy. Again, very underrated wide receiver room. You have guys like Roman Wilson, Cornelius Johnson, a couple tight ends there in Colston Loveland and A.J. Barner, Samaj Morgan, my apologies, is a really talented freshman, and the running back room may just be better than what Alabama possesses. Sure, statistically, doesn't get as many yards, but it's only 11 yards short, and I think they have the best running back on the field. That is Blake Corum. 1,028 yards, 24 rushing touchdowns. 24 rushing touchdowns for Blake Corum on the year. Donovan Edwards has really struggled to get it going, but we know that you have to plan for Donovan Edwards to be a factor because he is. He is a very, very big factor, and Donovan Edwards is a guy that you kind of leave him alone. Blake Corum's not in. We can take a play off. That's exactly when Donovan Edwards can beat you. Now, he doesn't have a run over 22 yards this year, but if he can start getting back to the way that he played last season, Donovan Edwards just adds a layer to this Michigan offense that can make it very, very dynamic. Again, J.J. McCarthy is very efficient, doesn't turn the football over a whole lot. In fact, this is an offense as a whole that only has 5 interceptions on the year, 4 of them, of course, by J.J. McCarthy, the other one by a real backup quarterback in the Davis Warren, and only 2 fumbles on the year. So Corum, Edwards, hey, if they're not really getting their yards, well, they hold on to the football. McCarthy's efficient with it. And this is an offensive line that's going to be missing Zach Zinter in all likelihood. However, still one of the best offensive lines in the country. That's where they have a leg up offensively on Bama. And defensively, what else do you want me to say about this Michigan defense? It's one of the best units in the country. It's the best scoring defense in the country. It is phenomenal at creating pressure, although I do have to mention, even though they have 32 sacks on the season, almost 2.5 sacks per game, this isn't really a killer pass rush. It's not really going to take over games. It's not going to be a dynamic thing. However, it is something that you have to account for, and it is something that affects games. While it may not take over games, it definitely puts their stamp on games with this pass rush, and also their ability to force takeaways there as well. 16 interceptions, 8 fumbles recovered by this defense. They're a really good defense on third down, only allowing opponents to convert 30.8% of their third down opportunities. And for what this team, sure, look, this pass rush is very, very good. Maybe it's not game-breaking, but it's very, very good. This is a Michigan rush defense that is very, very good and is game-breaking. And it's a secondary that has a lot of key parts there as well. This is just a loaded Michigan defensive roster. And I mean, when you compare these two teams here, especially when you look at the two defensive sides, this is going to be a smash mouth game. This is going to be a game where both teams are going to try to look to run the ball. This game is going to be won in the trenches. This game is going to be won with defensive intensity, and it all leads me into my what to watch for, kind of like your keys to the game, really whatever you want to call it. It's just things I think you should keep an eye on while you're paying attention here to this game. And let's start with the Alabama Crimson Tide. I think in order to have success here in this game, you have to be able to stretch this Michigan defense out. While Michigan has a very strong secondary, Alabama has played strong secondaries all season long. They know how to beat it. Jalen Milroe, if he needs to get outside of the pocket, he's going to need to make plays. He's going to need to make throws. But this is a Bama offense that can also keep Michigan committed and really keep them guessing on what's coming. Michigan, in really all 3 of their challenging games this year, that being Penn State, Maryland, and Ohio State down the stretch, all offenses were really one-dimensional in the games that they played. Penn State could run the ball. They couldn't really throw it downfield. Maryland, they could sure as hell throw the ball. They couldn't really run it. And then Ohio State had a lot more success passing than they did running, although there were a couple drives where Ohio State was able to smash mouth their way right down the field. But for the most part, this is the Bama offense that they can do everything. They can run, they can pass, they can get outside of the pocket. Jalen Milroe is an elite playmaker, and he's going to make some plays here in this game. He has to. Otherwise, Bama's offense not going to be able to do much of anything against this Michigan defense. But in order for all of that to happen, the offensive line must perform. It's going to perform in run blocking, as it has all season long. These two running backs here for Bama and McClellan and Williams, and even Jalen Milroe on some design quarterback runs and places where he gets outside of the pocket are going to make plays. But this pass protection needs to hold up. Again, not a game-breaking Michigan pass rush, but enough for it to have a huge effect on Michigan's ability to win this game. You have to have this offensive line step up in pass protection in some way, shape, or form. But defensively for Bama, again, this is a secondary that I think matches up really well with this Michigan wide receiver room. Defensively, on the defensive front, they're a really dynamic pass rushing. They're really dynamic at creating tackles for loss. You need to continue that. If you can limit what Corum and what Donovan Edwards is able to do, put the ball in the hands of J.J. McCarthy, we know J.J. McCarthy is going to make some plays, but against that secondary, Alabama's going to win some of those battles as well. Wreak havoc in the backfield. Now let's move over to the keys for the Michigan Wolverines. McCarthy and Corum will need to be dynamic. McCarthy needs to do pretty much what he's done all season long. He needs to be an efficient quarterback. Now, I'm not going to use the term game manager or game breaker. Look, if J.J. McCarthy is going to come out here and be a game breaker, hey, all for the better. Michigan probably ends up winning this game if that is the case. But he needs to still be efficient. He can't take any ridiculous, unnecessary shots. Take the shots when they present themselves. If you get a one-on-one matchup with someone like Cornelius Johnson on the outside, throw that 50-50 ball. Let your wide receiver go make plays. Don't force anything in the coverage. Continue doing what you've done all year long. Be efficient with the football, and Blake Corum has got to get that motor going. If he can average at least 4 yards per carry, if Donovan Edwards can pitch in some here and there as well, hey, Michigan's offense is going to look pretty good here, but the Wolverines front can make Alabama pay. It has to be able to contain Milroe. There is no question in my mind that Michigan is going to be able to get into the Alabama backfield and be able to, at times, disrupt this run game and disrupt what Milroe is able to do. So for me, it's not a question of if Michigan can get into the backfield. It's a question of if they can make the play, especially with their pass rush. This team is good at generating sacks, yes, but again, not a game-breaking pass rush. This is a Michigan defensive front that needs to contain Milroe in the pocket and needs to get him on the ground. You can't let him roll outside. You can't let him make the plays. That's going to end up hurting Michigan in the long run. But again, that's what I just talked about, right? Engage the pass rush, contain Milroe in the pocket, and force turnovers. This team has the best turnover margin in the country, and turnovers are really going to help this team. The line on this game, all lines and odds as of recording this video, 1.5 is where the line currently sits in favor of the Michigan Wolverines. And what do they say in Vegas? The house always wins. I am going with the Michigan Wolverines here for a very simple reason. Look, this is going to be a hard-nosed, smash-mouth game. Sorry, I just had to invert Michigan's colors there. It was really bothering me. But this is going to be a hard-nosed, smash-mouth game. But I think Michigan has what it takes to make the Alabama Crimson Tide pay. I think Michigan has what it takes to be able to get pressure into the backfield, be able to limit Jalen Milroe's ability just enough to help Michigan win this game. And again, J.J. McCarthy is as efficient as any quarterback across the entire country. He's going to do his job. Blake Corum is going to do his job. This Michigan defense will do its job. And I think Michigan comes out on top here and wins this game. I think Michigan, in their third consecutive try, finally break into the national championship game. All credit to Alabama. Jalen Milroe is going to make plays. This is an Alabama team that's going to hit their shots down the field. But when it comes to physicality on the line of scrimmage, who wins the battle in the trenches? I think Michigan has the better running back in Blake Corum. I think they have the better offensive line. And I think they have enough of what it takes on the defensive front to contain Milroe and break this game open. So I think Michigan will win the Rose Bowl and move on to the national championship game. 50-50 game. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. And hey, as always, remember to play hard but tailgate harder. Texas and Washington. That video's coming out soon. Goodbye.